Going to continue. Let's bring up the page. We're going to continue in the Gemara on page 104b, towards the bottom of the page, in the wide lines. So we're continuing. We're going through the verses of Eicha. So it says like this. The pasuk says, Lamentations, it says, Lo yalechem kol ovrei derech. So it says it's nothing. It is nothing to you, O you who passed by. Lo yalechem, it's nothing to you. Kol ovrei derech, those who passed the path, who went past the path. So what does this mean? So Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rava says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Mikan lekul b'no min Torah. This is an interesting concept. That's not. I'm not sure if there's a clarity of the conclusion of this, but basically, from here we see that it's okay to complain according to the Torah. The question is, if you're complaining in a way that's like an angry, or complaining in a way to telling others your problems, so they should also not have to go through with the difficulties you've went through. Kol evrei derech. So this is, in other words, it's appropriate for one to make his suffering or her suffering public so that others will have compassion for him. So sometimes you wonder if I have to keep my pain inside, it's okay for other people to feel bad for you. First of all, they should daven for you or could help you. So also it says, Kol oivrei derech, Amarav, Amram, Amarav. So basically, what's the connection to the verse, to what he's saying? So Lo Yalechem, he's saying you shouldn't have to go through Kol Ovrei Derech, those who went through the path. Those who are going through the path shouldn't have to go through the things that I've gone through. So Rava says, Amar Rav Amram, Amar Rava. Rav Amram says the name of Rav. Sorry, Asuni Ka'ovrei Aldas. So as if the Jewish people have made me Ovrei Derech to mean Oiver Adas, as if I went against I violated the accepted way. Why? What's that mean? The Ilu B'Stoim Chsiv, when it comes to the city of Stom and Gemara, where God punished them, it says, Vashem Himter al Stoim, right? God rains down on them brimstone and fire, so they get totally destroyed, the city. Ilu B'Yerushalayim, when it comes to the city of Jerusalem, which seemingly the Gemara is going to understand to say that Jerusalem also deserved maybe such a punishment like Stom and Gemara at the time. So it says that from above he has sent fire into my bones and it prevails, but seemingly not as strong as what is done to Stom and Gemara. At the same time, it says that Bas Ami, the daughter of my people, was worse, was greater than the severities of Stom. So basically, they're saying as if God was giving favor to the Jewish people. Why didn't He punish the Jewish people like He punished in Stom? So okay, just what it says before about it's okay to complain. So we're going to learn. Rashi says, Lo yalechem navi hayim misnoided al churban. The prophet, when he's talking about the destruction, meaning Yirmiyahu is talking about the destruction, as if he has a personal suffering. And he's turning to the Jewish people, you shouldn't have to suffer the suffering that I suffer, the suffering of the destruction. Here Rashi tells us a medrashic kind of idea. So who is he talking to? It means if he's talking to the Jewish people, he's not telling them a pain that he has that they shouldn't have. They also went through. The destruction of Yirmiyahu is the destruction of the Jewish people. It's the destruction of the temple, the exile of the Jewish people. So who is he referring to? So Rashi says, that he's prophesying to the sons of Moshe. There's an idea that Moshe's family kind of was separated from the Jewish people at some point, and they are on the other side of the Sambatyan. There's different ideas of where the 10 tribes are, where the children of Moshe are. There's evidently an isolated place, someplace called the Sambatyan, behind a protected space, that the sons of Moshe are there and the 10 tribes are there, that Nebuchadnezzar did not exile. I mean, although the 10 tribes were exiled by Sanhedrin, But evidently, the first of all, the exile at Sanhedrin possibly wasn't as bad physically for the 10 tribes as what the destruction of the temple and what happened in the exile of Jerusalem. And also, they didn't go through the destruction of Nebuchadnezzar, even though they had their own issues. Like, it's okay. Basically, from here we see it's okay to complain. Even, you wonder, like, if a person, who are you complaining to? If you're complaining to a person who has nothing to, who has not experienced any suffering, so what's the, maybe that's okay, but that's one thing. But to complain to someone who has suffering, maybe the idea is even someone who has suffering, their suffering is different than your suffering. You're allowed to also have issues that you could, you wish they don't have to go through what you went through. You don't go through what they went through. So also he calls it when he says oivrei derech, means like oivrei hadas, means that God went against the path, the straight path. The straight path would be, the Maharshal would say, that that God should have punished Jerusalem like he punished Sodom. The fact that he doesn't punish Jerusalem like he punished Sodom, so he says, you present it as if I'm oivrei das, I'm going against the right path. He says, Mikan lekul b'no min Torah. But Rashi explains, from here we learn that a person could complain. Complaining means, and it's not just complaining. Complaining also means to try to get sympathy, the rachmanis. Meaning, when a person goes through a difficult situation and lets it be known to others, when you say it, this should not happen to you. I'm saying this also, you should hopefully you never experience, but not in a begrudging way or in a cynical way. Some people say that in a way of a cynical way. It's not in an honest way, in a true way. Like I went through. Not this, I'm not sure what Rashi means exactly in this one. He says sometimes it's hard to hear other people suffering, maybe it makes people think uncomfortable thoughts. So he's saying it's okay to complain, even if some people, again, obviously everything's in a measured way, and obviously it shouldn't have a bitterness. I hope you don't suffer what I suffered, kind of thing. But it's normal. Sometimes bottling everything up is not okay. So here we see the Navi even complain. Now Rashi says one line. He says, "Someone who's makbid, who's careful about this, it's not considered a person who the Torah says shouldn't have superstitions." I'm not sure if he's referring to the person who says it, who says the complaints, or the person who doesn't want to hear it. It means Rashi is saying if you don't want to hear it, it's okay. It's not considered a person who has superstitions. If I hear something bad, it's going to happen to me. Lashon acher, the kulbina. If anyone has any insight how they understand Rashi, please explain. But I'm not sure. I think he means one of the two. Either the person. I think it's more the person listening who's makbid shouldn't feel that doesn't have to feel that this is violating the idea of not having superstition. Lashon acher, the kulbina kishesh leitzara yediena lerabim kulbina tzaka. You should have other people cry out for your pain. Lashon acher, neged mitargim makibel ka'adam sha'im lachaveirei loikinek techani omer. Also, like he's saying in such a way that the person is saying, I'm not talking about you, talking about me. When a person says, why are you telling me about your problems? You have to understand, it's not that I'm trying to, it's about me, it's my suffering. All right. B'yerdena v'saref oisa v'hainu astunika oivrei das shedanani b'eish kistoim. As if basically God didn't burn Jerusalem in the way he burnt Sodom. I'm over and das. I'm going against the way, the right path. B'yerdena lashon shvira. Kamoy v'yerd mi'akav k'adam ha'moishel b'chaver la'akosev l'shavrei. What are we referring to over here? He says, so he says about Jerusalem that he sent fire into my bones and it prevails. So what's Rashi say? What's prevailed? It broke me. That the fire broke the Jewish people, like it says, like a person who rules over the next person to break that person. So too, the people of Jerusalem went through a breaking, a suffering, but not to the level of what happened at Sodom. That the people of Jerusalem sinned even worse than the sins of Sodom. Is God showing favor that the Jewish people sin worse and they don't get punished as bad? If the Jewish people in the time of the destruction of the first temple were worse than the people of Sodom, why didn't the Jerusalem turn upside down like Sodom? Another idea is meaning this is this in the Gemara by Steinsaltz. This part of the Rashi should really be in the next part of the Gemara. But basically, the Gemara is going to say is God showing favor. So the Gemara is going to answer about that. Another expression or sign that God didn't punish Jerusalem to the extent as He punished Sodom is because in Sodom it says that God Himself, God Himself goes down. When it comes to Jerusalem, it's He does it with a shliach. He does it with an emissary. I think they have to do the layout of the app here by Rabbi Steinsaltz Gemara a bit better because they put in the Rashis and sometimes the commentaries, but they should let the Gemara flow a bit more. Okay, that's just a side note. I'll let them know. A source from the Torah for complaint. See Rashi, who cites 3 explanations concerning this statement. The fourth, so Rashi, we said, what was the 3 ideas? One was to tell people it's your troubles is okay. Also to say in a way that's you're not talking to them. And also he mentioned the idea of there's no idea of superstition. So he says a fourth explanation is that this is proof from the Torah, which is in the sense includes the entire Bible, that it is permitted for one to bemoan or protest his suffering, not just to let people know, but also to protest. Okay, this is crossing difficult conversations about the idea of how a person accepts suffering. This idea of a person who's makabel yisurim ba'ava, right? And in doing so, he's not considered to be rejecting the suffering with which God afflicts him. So here he's saying that here we see clearly that Yirmiyahu is complaining about the suffering. So from here we see it's okay to complain and be upset and protest about when you're suffering, which is okay. Obviously, everyone's human, but it's this little piece that Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying has to be taken into context because in Torah we do have an idea of being Makabel Yisurim Ba'ava. Job and all the whole idea of the book of Job is about that. All right, so we continue. So the Gemara is asking again. This piece should be before. It says, is God showing favor? Right? Is he giving the Jewish people a better, so to say, he dealing better or nicer to the Jewish people than he did with the people of Sodom? So Rav explains no. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav says name Rabbi Yochanan. Mida Yisera Haisa B'Yishleim Shli Haisa B'Stayim. There was something about, there's 2 ways to learn this Gemara, whether it's positive or negative. But there was Mida Yisera. There was an additional measure, means they were greater or worse in Jerusalem that they didn't have in Sodom. When it comes to Sodom, the simple explanation is that the Jerusalemites were better. This is the sin of Sodom, so to say, your sister. But it says about them, Go'oin sivas lechem. They had pride and they were satisfied. The people of Sodom didn't suffer. They weren't hungry. The Jewish people went through a lot of suffering before the destruction. The hunger and the sieges, Sodom, pitom, right? They were doing their business of being horrible people. And one day the angels came and flipped the city. But they didn't go through a process of suffering before then. They had pride, Svias Lachem means they were satisfied with bread. And they still didn't help anyone. So even though they were so bad that even they had, and they went, and God forbid someone, God forbid I'm saying it in a mocking way, in a sarcastic way, if someone helped a poor person, that person got punished, right? Haktsakasa, Rashi says, what was the cry that God heard that was the final decision to flip Sodom, to bring down and destroy whole Sodom? Was the young girl who gave money to a poor person or gave food to a poor person, and they tortured her to death. So Vilu B'Yishleim, when Jerusalem, although the people in Jerusalem were bad and they were punished, but they were starvation. Nevertheless, Yad Nashim Rachmanis Bishul Yaldeim. So the pasuk again has to be taken into context. Compassionate women cooked their children. So that's obviously saying a horrible thing. That even though they're compassionate women, they cooked their children and nothing to eat. They killed their own children, God forbid. But nevertheless, they shared. They ate. They didn't eat themselves. They ate with others. Though it says in the in the Klales differently. And we're going to learn, I think it's in this week's Parsha, B'chukaisai, it talks about all these horrible things. And then later in Devarim, it talks about that they're not going to share. But here it says, Yidei Nashim Rachmanis Bishru Adem. They shared. So Rashi explains. There's different commentaries. Some look at it that the people in Sodom were worse than the people of Jerusalem. But the people of Jerusalem were worse than the people of Sodom. Let's see what Rashi says. Midi Yisrael the Toiva. So Rashi adds the word Toiva. The people in Jerusalem were better. As bad as they were better than the people of Sodom. Therefore, they did not deserve to be punished like the people of Sodom. The Bishulaim Chsiv Yedei Nashim Rachmaniyas Bishlu Yaldehem. They cooked in the hands of the compassionate woman, they cooked their own children. They had nothing to eat. So they didn't just eat themselves. They invited a friend to come eat with them. And this is a description of a horrible situation. But in the horror of the situation, there was compassion. There was kindness. Where in Sodom, they didn't go through horrors. They had sevel lachem. They were full, and nevertheless, they punished anyone who fed the poor people. From here we see Rachmani. They were more compassionate. When it comes to Sodom, it says Yad Ani ve'evin lo yechzika. They didn't help the poor. Meaning to say, there's two things here. What the Gemara obviously is telling us two things. So one who looks at this pasuk says, so why was Jerusalem worse? I mean, Jerusalem was. Why do we start off the statement saying that God quotes that Alei Derech means that Oiver Das because the people, and he quotes a verse to say the people of Jerusalem were worse than the people of Sodom. So it could be in certain things they were worse. Maybe in serving idols and other things they may be worse than the people of Sodom. When it came down to personal suffering and compassion for their fellow person who they were together doing things they shouldn't be doing, nevertheless, there were signs of compassion, signs of goodness, where the people of Sodom were horrible people, and they're horrible to each other. So they were maybe the actual sins of Jerusalem worse than the sins of Sodom, but as people go, as characters of people, the people of Sodom were horrible people. So he says, where the people of Sodom didn't help the poor. And because the Jewish people had this compassion, in the horror of the punishment, before the destruction of the temple, when they were starving, compassionate women would share their cooked children with their colleagues or their friends. That was a kapara. That was an atonement. Therefore, they didn't get destroyed. They didn't get flipped over like stone. Lashon Achron, that's one opinion in how you view what Rav is saying. Lashon Achron midi ser pranius. He's saying it's worse. That Jerusalem was still worse than Sodom. Shialdeim hayu eichles zu im zu. That how their children ate from each other, literally. That the children of Jerusalem had to eat each other, where in Sodom they didn't suffer anything. They didn't have to taste the taste of poverty. So therefore, what Rav is saying is the punishment of Jerusalem was worse than the punishment of Sodom. Maybe they didn't get destroyed. Maybe they didn't get flipped over. But they reached the level that they were eating each other. That's because they were so starving. With Sodom, they didn't starve. So maybe the final end was worse, but they didn't go through a stage of suffering. Therefore, it's not considered that God favored the Jewish people. If he favored the Jewish people, he wouldn't put them to such a horrors of these are things that we read about in this week's parsha, in the Haftarah, in the story of in the curses. Yeah, so the commentators bring down the second idea that Rashi says that the suffering of Jerusalem is worse than the suffering of Sodom, therefore it's not considered that God gave them favor. Rashi explains, Reb Sheinza says, that Jerusalem there were those who embodied the positive quality of compassion. The Ramah explains, like I said, they shared. The Ramah explains that according to this opinion, the verse attests to the fact that there were some compassionate women, whereas in Sodom there was no one who exhibited compassion. So the idea that the Torah is saying that some people in Jerusalem were worse, but there's some people who were compassionate, where in Sodom there was no compassion. So the Ramah is saying a little different than what I said, that I was saying that there's two levels of behavior. There's bad behavior in certain things, and then there's how you share with each other, where the Ramah says it's actually a sign of that not everyone was as bad in Jerusalem as it was in Sodom. Maybe some were worse, but others were better. The pasuk continues in Eicha, it says, Sila kol abirai Hashem bekirbi. The Lord has spurned all my mighty men in the midst of me. What's this mean? It's as if a person says to one's colleague, this this coin is invalid. So he's saying that the prominent residents of Jerusalem were crushed and discredited in the reputation, were irreversibly tainted. So it became such a situation where just like a coin becomes nifsal, those days, in the days of today, we have, right, I don't know, the laws in America is like, if you have a little bit of a dollar, it's considered a dollar, or a little bit of a penny is a penny. But those days, the value was the actual coin itself. So if the coin became disqualified, they had no value anymore. So there's no value to the coins of the Jewish people. It means they were totally discredited in the time of the destructions. He says, God totally destroyed any kind of reputation of the Jewish people. They became disqualified and conquered. It's like a stone. They became like a sorry, not a stone, a coin that becomes disqualified. You can never bring it back into circulation. Sometimes you have coins that can be brought back into circulation. The Jewish people became like a coin that can never be brought back into circulation. Also says Abiram is they broke all their limbs, so to say, that they were totally crushed. There's nothing left. There was no hope left to the Jewish people, even the most prominent. I mean, you have to remember the Jewish people went through the destruction of the temple. We're today descendants of the diaspora Jews, right? 2,000 years of diaspora since the second temple. The second temple was after the diaspora. The first temple, in the first temple, this was the first experience of diaspora since Egypt. But since they became a nation, they left. They got Matan Torah. They went to Israel. After 700 years, it was a crushing reality for them. It was that idea that today the Jewish people are known as a people of diaspora. That didn't exist then. So this whole idea of the Eicha is literally taking a free people and turning them into people of the diaspora. So he says, what does it mean? Some explain that the sila means trampled or crushed through trampling, the Ramad. The comparison here is to a coin that eroded, although it maintains its original form, it's still the shape of a coin, so no longer in circulation. Likewise, the Holy One, blessed be He, did the same for the luminaries of the Jewish people. He rid them of their value and significance. So the Jewish people lost all significance. All value was totally taken from the Jewish people as part of the punishment of the day of the destruction of the temple and the exile. Again, we learned before that most of the Eicha, it was written in the Aleph base. It means the order of the Aleph base. We learned before that the reason why Eicha, we asked last week, why is the Eicha written in the Aleph base? Because the Jewish people violated the Torah that were given in the Aleph base, and every letter corresponded to another krisis, another kind of violation. So here he asks a question that we have sometimes when it comes to the alphabet. In the Eicha, the Pei, which is the letter value of 80, is always after Ayin, which is 70, right? So Ayin comes before Pei, but in the Eicha, we find that the Pei comes before the Ayin. So why does the Pei, that if it should be in order, the Pei should come after the Ayin? So the Gemara asks the question. It says, Patsu alayich pihem. They have opened their mouth against you. This is part of the admonishment. Yirmiyahu is talking about the Jewish people. So what is this talking about? So Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Again, Rava says the name of Yochanan. Shema hiktim pei la'ayin. Why in Eichad we find many times the pei, letter pei, comes before the letter ayin. The order should be ayin pei. So the Gemara says why? Because it's the hint, an idea. Yishvil meraglim. This all starts from the spies of that spied on Eretz Yisrael in the days of Moses. Right, we're going to learn about it in a few weeks. She'amar b'fiyam ashlei ra b'neiim. That they said with their mouth what they didn't see with their eyes. Meaning they lied. They were saying things that weren't true. They saw certain things, and they communicated other things. So that's why the pei comes before the ayin, the pei, which represents the peh, the mouth, and the ayin means in Hebrew is the word for eye. They put their mouths before their eyes. So he says, why most of the aleph beis vecha, we find that the pei comes before the ayin. The Meraglim, this is to tell us about the spies. He said about their mouth what they didn't do before they saw with their eye. Okay, that's what Rashi says. Other of the commentators ask about that. Says the Eitz Yosef asked the question. It says actually. That what does it mean that they said with their mouth before they saw with their eyes? It says either they said what they saw, which is the truth, or they lied and they just made up things. It has nothing to do with their eyes. So it says, what does it mean? He quotes what Rashi says in the Chumash, that they went and they came. So Rashi says that their going was like they're returning. Just like when they returned is the bad agenda. They went with the bad agenda. So when it says they went with their mouths before their eyes, they before they even saw anything about the land, they had already a precondition. They already decided they're going to talk evil about the land of Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. So because they were going to talk evil about Eretz Yisrael, their mouth was already prepared, no matter what their eyes would see. It was before they even went to spy. Rashi tells us on Torah that they already had decided that they're going to give a bad report in Eretz Yisrael. Again, the spies is people. When we read about the spies, a lot of people get worked up and try to understand how is it possible that they did that. Nothing's changed. A lot evil talk about Jewish people from amongst our own people. And people trying to hurt the Jewish people from within has happened and still happening. So that happened then and it happens now too. Eichel ami oichel lechem. The Eicha continues. Oichli ami oichel lechem Hashem. So seemingly that says the eaters of my people ate bread. Loi karo and Hashem loi karo, and they didn't call out to God. What does this mean? So he says this means that Rav says the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kol ha'oichel milachman shel Yisrael. This is it's a dark idea. Whoever eats the Jewish bread, i.e., eats from the Jewish people, takes things from the Jewish people, or eats the Jewish people themselves, tortures, we learned before, right? Those who torment the Jewish people end up becoming leaders. Toim tam lachem, then they taste bread. The only satisfaction they have is anti-Semitism. That's basically the pasuk is saying. When do they taste the taste of bread? What gives them taste and happiness and satisfaction is if they eat the bread of the Jewish people. Their own bread, they don't. Issues, right? Issues outside of the Jewish people. The worst crimes being committed are the Jewish people. And all the focus is on the Jewish people. Where do they find taste and energy in their life is about the Jewish people. If they're not eating Jewish bread, any time tam lech, and they don't taste any bread. They don't have any satisfaction when it's not an issue about Jews. Again, nothing has changed. Hashem like karo, what does it mean they don't call it to God? Rav Oimer Elu Hadayanim. This is a separate part of the pasuk. It means he splits the pasuk in two. What does it mean they don't call out to God? These are talking about bad judges. Shmuel Oimer Elu Maladi Tanakis. These are talking about bad teachers. Bad teachers mean the teachers of children who don't teach properly, who don't have the right intentions in their teaching children, or bad judges who judge inappropriately. So that's what it means that they're not calling out to God. Let's see how Rashi explains. Rashi says, "Toim tam lechem shakutim." The Gentiles, moitziim tamam belachem shel Yisrael. When do they find taste in bread if it's Jewish bread? Again, it's a mashal, it's an idea, not just the literal bread of the Jewish people. But where do they find satisfaction? Is when they bother Jewish people. Shasina, the hate they have for the Jewish people. Hulehen kishagoyzlan, when they steal from the Jewish people, that's where they get their hana. That's where they get their shahanosh hu lehem kishagoyzlan. Where they get hana, where they get pleasure, is only when they steal from the Jewish people. Or again, included in that is all ideas of anti-Semitism. Elu hadayonim. What does this mean that Hashem like Karo? These are the judges. Mata mishpat b'shvil avnesayim hayu lechem ami lemachel oivav. And he says because they misjudged, so that the connection to the verse is, why does the bread of the Jewish people become the bread of our enemies? Because the judges didn't call out to God. The judges didn't do what they should do. Also, the teachers are not teaching with the right attitude. It's a crooked teacher. I mean, they're using it whether they're not teaching right, or they're not their attitude's right, or they're not giving the right hours, etc. It says judges and teachers of children are mentioned here because by virtue of their position, they should certainly have mentioned the name of God while issuing verdicts or teaching children. So they're not teaching properly, giving enough education, or mentioning God enough in their verdicts. The Maharsha says a little differently in the idea of the Gentiles only find satisfaction in eating the Jewish bread. Is he says that just like a person doesn't find satisfaction unless the person eats bread. Bread fills up a person. Other foods have less an effect, so are less filling. So too, the anti-Semites only feel satisfaction when it's against the Jewish people, and anything else they don't find real satisfaction. Again, this is, it can be sad, but we see it's still very true. And the Mashal also says about the teachers and the judges, the reason why he singles them out is because of that's their financial gain is in judging and teaching. So he feels they have more responsibility. Okay, so here we're going to go in and out a bit. So we finished a little bit about Eicha. We're going to go back to Eicha because at the end of the day, the people that are mentioned who don't have a portion in the world to come are kind of people towards the end of the destruction of the temple. So it kind of mixes in. But now we want to know, this is a difficult Gemara. We gave a list of kings, Menashe, Yerovim, and Achav, and commoners who don't have a portion of the world to come. The Mishnah says it. And that's the whole mission of Chelek, right? Who has a Chelek? Who has a portion of the world to come? So who decided this list? Right? The Gemara has been asking, why isn't this person mentioned? Why isn't Achaz mentioned? Why isn't this king mentioned? Why is this king yes mentioned? Why Yehokim not mentioned? We don't have. So the question is, but who actually decided the list of kings and commoners who don't have a portion of the world to come? So the Gemara addresses this question now. Mi Manan, who counted? Who decided to list the people that are not going to be part of the portion of the world to come? Amar Rav Ashi says again. Rav Ashi is from the last of the Talmudic rabbis in the Talmud Bavli. He says in the Babylonian Talmud, Anshe Knesset G'dei the members of the Great Assembly. So from here we'll understand also why no one is mentioned past the destruction of the first temple, because the members of the Great Assembly were still had some of the prophets of the first temple, Haggai, Zechariah, or the early prophets of the second temple. But the members of the Great Assembly were Mordechai was on the member of the Great Assembly. Mordechai, the from the story of Purim. The members of the Great Assembly kind of were established towards the end of the exile, the second exile, into the beginning. Ezra, Nehemiah, these are all the members of the Great Assembly. They never the Knesset that we have today in the Jewish is trying to be a replica of the members of the Great Assembly. So the Mishnah we just learned Pirkei Avos, right? So Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous, which was the high priest in the beginning of the second temple, he was from the last of the members of the Great Assembly. Okay, so the members of the Great Assembly, they was kind of there was the transition. So we had three stages really of the Jewish people. We had, or let's count 4 stages. You have Egypt, you have desert going into Israel, the judges into the kings, the prophets, the kings, and the first temple, the division of the Jewish people, the first temple, the destruction. So that's 2 stages: the exile of Egypt and the exile of Egypt and going into the land till the destruction of the first temple. Then you have the exile between the first and second temple, and then you have the rebuilding of the second temple. So that transition, they never truly recovered from the destruction of the first temple. We know that Ezra and Nehemiah did not bring all the Jewish people back, right? It says, Ad Yavra Hashem Ad Yavra Amzu Kanisa. It said, had the Jewish people come back the way they should have come back in the first, in the second, by the second temple, there was a lot of people just stayed in Babel. We know that the communities of Babel, of what's today Iran and Iraq, remained until the year 1011. I mean, it was remained until 1948, and still today the small little Jewish pockets in Iran and Iraq. But we're talking about a proper Jewish community that became the center. That was the center during the second temple, before the second temple, and especially after the second temple. The Talmud Bavli, most people had to leave Eretz Yisrael, and again, the Jewish people were centered in Bavel until Jewish people started to migrate to North Africa, and then to Southern Europe, and then all the way up to the Ashkenazi areas of Germany, France, and then later into Russia and Poland in Eastern Europe. But for many, many years, the largest place the Jewish people lived in Israel in our history was in Bavel. And that was like, and that all started after the destruction of the first temple. We never properly recovered from that. So the members of the Great Assembly were very essential to that transition, to trying to restart Jewish life in Eretz Yisrael. Obviously, in the days of the second temple, especially after the Chashmonaim, the story of Hanukkah, there was great numbers in Eretz Yisrael. Bavel became small in the height of the second temple. There was many converts. It says at some point, under Romans, there was almost 20% were Jewish people. There was huge interest in Judaism that was centered around Eretz Yisrael. But there was always a stronghold in Bavel as well, in Babylonia as well. So the members of the Great Assembly, Anshe Knesset, they're the ones who counted who's on that list. Now, the members of the Great Assembly were the beginning of the Second Temple. Obviously, anyone past them were not on that list. Rav Yehuda Rav. So Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav. Doesn't say who, out of respect. Bikshu oid limnes echad. They wanted to add another king to the list. Who's that king? Rashi is going to tell us, the Gemara is going to tell us, it was Solomon. They wanted to add King Shlomo to the list. Why? As a person who doesn't have, it's a very controversial concept here. There's different Gemaras and Midrashim about this idea about Shlomo. The Gemara tells us Shlomo didn't sin. The Gemara in Shabbos tells us. But because of some of the negatives that Shlomo did, that led to the division of the 10 tribes from the house of David, the ideas of his wives serving idols. He went, Shlomo did what, he really risked everything. His intention was to bring Mashiach, right? So he really went really far to try to bring the nations in, and there was consequences. So Bikshu Oid Limnei Sacha, they wanted to add Solomon to the list for the bottom line of maybe the negatives of what he did. I mean, we're talking about the person who authored the Shir Hashirim till today, the Kehelas. I mean, it's very complicated. The members of the Great Assembly were obviously very tough people. We know that from Nehemiah and Ezra. Vad Musei Diakne Shel Aviv. Again, doesn't want to mention his name. His father came to them. Who's his father? King David. He prostrated, he bowed to them, begging, don't add my son to the list. But they didn't pay attention to even David's pleas, not to add the members. Again, the members of the Great Assembly dealt with a lot of hard things. You have to give them credit, not just to look at them as a tough group, but they had literally to do this transition, to bring the people out of exile, back into Eretz Yisrael, and to do the Second Temple, not in good conditions, right? Under Cyrus and under Daryavish, it wasn't easy. So they had to make a lot of hard choices. The Gemara tells us that they caught the Yetzer Hara. They caught they got rid of the desire the Jewish people had to serve idols. We don't find idol worship after this in the Second Temple. Why? Because the members in the Great Assembly dealt with it. They literally got rid of that Yetzer Hara, that Satan that was within the Jewish people that they wanted to serve idols. They eliminated it. They were a very powerful group of people. So here they decide to add Solomon to the list. And David comes to them, King David comes, and they don't pay attention. God comes to them. Fire comes down from heaven. And the fire started to burn the benches that they were sitting on. They still didn't pay attention to it. They weren't going to even listen to God's message. Rashi says, who counted these kings and commoners? They don't have a portion in the world to come. They wanted to add someone else. Who's that other person? Shlomo. They wanted to add King Shlomo. Who came to them? The Yokne Shel David. The image of David came to the members of the Great Assembly of his father. They begged him that they shouldn't add his son. Rashi just says the idea of Safel is low chair or low bench. Originally, the word specifically denoted a seat designated for distinguished individuals sitting on a chair slightly lower than the seat of the ruler. Mimanan. So he said, the question can be explained simply. The other matters listed in the Mishnah means the question: why does the Mishnah ask who counted these people? Although I'm not sure what the problem is. It's a simple question. Why would these people mentioned? But he says basically we don't have clarity on the people that are mentioned. Because the Gemara goes into asking why this person is, why this person is not. So he says the other matters listed, when we in the beginning of the Mishnah, if you remember, we give a list of other people's, not people's, but other things that you do, apokarisim, people who don't have a portion of the world to come. So the other missions are based on logical analysis. And it is clear why they are enumerated. By contrast, determining who has a share in the world to come is not dependent on analysis. They're just giving names. If this is the case, who enumerated them? Who decided? So Rav Ashi answered that it was the members of the Great Assembly, among them the last prophets, not just anyone. These are prophets, that part of the members of the Great Assembly. And it was through prophecy that they enumerated who would have the share in the world to come. Although they wanted to add people, that David was against it, God was against it. Says that Rasha says, what does it mean that the image of David came to them? ask, to plead that they don't add him. It was the so to say the avoda, who David was. And it says, "Vayahiv Shlomo es Hashem leches b'chukas David," and it said that Shlomo behaved like his father David. So it was basically David's behavior that Shlomo also behaved that way. That was begging that he shouldn't be counted amongst those who don't have a portion to the world to come. So first David comes, then a fire comes down, and they don't pay attention. Yatsa Baskel, a voice comes down from heaven, V'Amr Lahem, and says to the members of the great assembly, Chazisa ish mari malachtai. Have you seen a person who's fast in his work? Lifnei malachim isyatzav, bal isyatzav nechashuchim. He should stand before the kings. He shouldn't be standing before the obscure man. Basically, God actually didn't just give a sign of fire. He said, "Why are you counting Shlomo Melech? Me, what does it mean, fast people? Me shehigdim beisi leveisai, the king who built my house before his own house. But not only did he build his house before my house, in my house he built fast. In 7 years means he put tremendous effort to build my house. Not because he built it fast in a low quality way, but he put a lot of effort. Well, in his own house, he kind of took time for 13 years. Or Bal Yisatzav, he shouldn't be added to the kings, or he should be standing before other kings. Depends how you have the girsa. Still, he shouldn't be standing. He shouldn't be standing before the obscure. Still, they didn't listen to God. So then God said, Then another voice came down from heaven and said, He says, the voice said, shall his recompense be as you will it? Are you trying to? He says, you decide if he has to pay because you don't like him, because you loathe it, and you choose and not me. So he's basically he's telling them, you can't decide, I decide. Rashi doesn't explain what that means. Actually, I'm going to explain in a second what is the idea of them not listening. He shouldn't be in front of the obscure people in hell. He has to be in the world to come. Shlomo belongs in the Garden of Eden, not in hell. Are you the one who decides if Shlomo has to pay because you don't like him? So you're going to take away from him the portion of the world to come? You're going to choose, not me. Is it up for you to choose? Not me. God finally says, he put his foot down. It's not for you to decide who has a portion of the world to come. That's for me to decide. Mix up. Although God allowed them to keep the other people in. Once God is already saying that, he should say, then they should drop the whole list. But he was only coming on behalf of Shlomo. So I just want to say before, the idea over here is, what does it mean, Yatzabasko? God says, David comes and they don't listen. There's a theory we find this many times in the Gemara, those who learned these parts of the Gemara, that the many times Hashem would come into an argument, and they wouldn't listen. Why? Based on the teaching that's connected really to Matan Torah, that says that Torah la b'shamayim. Once Torah was given, God wants. There's two kind of ways of what God wants. God wants that the Torah has to be decided, right? Eile moedei Hashem. The Bezdin decides when is Rosh Chodesh, when is the holidays. Torah decides. There's many times it's quoted where there's different disagreements between God and the Bezdin and the courts, and God, and we have the famous story. I think we learned it already, where Rabbi Shua ben Levi asks Eliyahu Navi, "What does God say in these situations?" He says, "Nitzchoni b'ni nitzchoni." God laughs. He says, "You've beat me." When they don't listen to the story with Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar, when Rabbi Lazar was asking God's help to prove that he was right, and Rabbi Yeshua said, "Torah lo b'shamayim." Torah's not in heaven. Torah has to be. We have to use our minds and understand how we're supposed to do Torah. So even if God is coming down and saying no, and David's coming down and saying no, we have to decide. But at the end here, God went and said, "This is you're going past your comfort zone. This is not where you belong." That was his final message. That's why here they listened to. It says this time they listened. You have to remember the Gemara does not mention the name Shlomo. Rashi tells us who it is. There's no mention because it's out of respect to Shlomo. The Talmud doesn't tell us. It's clearly who he's talking about, but it doesn't tell us as respect to Shlomo Melech. But the idea is that the Bezin, the members of the Great Assembly have to see the way they understand it. And they understood that Shlomo should be added until God said, this is past your pay grade. I decide who's on the list, not you. The Mashra says that, what does it mean that God says that that you don't like the things that a person, the only things that a person could choose, everything's in your hands besides the fear of heaven. It means if a person, it says God decides a person's going to be rich or poor is a decision by God. Smart or less smart is a decision by God. How God-fearing the person is, that's up to the person. So it says, so he says the things that you could choose. What God's saying is that when I say that Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is only how you behave. The punishments or the rewards for how you behave, that's up to me. So the members of the Great Assembly were overstepping. They're saying if that what we say is that whatever God fear of God is given to the people. So they were considering so too the punishment, the decision of how people behave should be given to the people. God said no. The fear itself is given to the people, but the reward for how you behave, that's up to me. And I'm not adding Shlomo to that list. But here the Gemara now says, a little further, those who interpret the Torah used to say that kulam ba'in la'olam haba. At the end, everyone comes to the world to come. At the end, they figured a different entry points. For even the people on the list, at the end, they made it to the world to come. Shnemer li gilad. Here we have a verse to support this idea that says, and I'm going to see what the verse means. To me is Gilad, to me is Menashe and Ephraim. Mo'iz Raishi. So the strength of my head, sorry. Yehuda Mechaykiki, the specters from Yehuda. Moav Seir, Moav is a washing pot. We'll see what this all means. Al Edom Ashtechnali, on Edom I throw my shoe. Alai Pileshes is Oiri, and the cry of the Pileshes is for me. What does this mean? What does this verse mean? This is a verse to tell us that all those people that we just spoke about in the past few weeks that don't have a portion of the world to come, God brings them in. Li Gilad is V'li Menashe is referring to Achav. Shnafel Beramat Gilad. Achav died in the fight of Gilad. At the end, he goes in Li. He comes into the Garden of Eden. Menashe is Menashe, the king of Menashe. Ephraim Moiz Raishi. What's Ephraim? We said before that Yeravim, the son of Nevat, the first king to be mentioned, is from the tribe of Menashe, of Ephraim. So it says Ephraim is the strength of my head. That's referring to Yeravim, that he also goes into the world to come. Takasim Ephraim, he came from Ephraim. Yehudi Mechaykiki, who's Yehuda? So that's referring to Achitophel. Achitophel, we'll learn about, is the one. He's on the list of people who don't have a person in the world to come. He was David's companion because he was from the tribe of Yehuda, but at the same time he was David's enemy. He was his advisor. Very complicated personality. His grandfather-in-law, right? Bathsheba, his wife, was the granddaughter of Achitophel. So, but he ends up siding with Avshalom. That when he was always looking to destroy David, he was his closest advisor. Right? Keep your enemies close. Literally, his enemies were very close. So in the beginning, we said Achitophel doesn't have a portion to world to come. He was also David's teacher, right? We learned that David learned from Achitophel two things, and he called him his teacher, but he was also his greatest enemy. So, but nevertheless, Achitophel gets into the world to come. I believe we'll learn more about Achitophel later. So it says, Doisha Rishumais. What does Doisha Rishumais mean? So it says, Doisha Psukim, those who learn the verses properly, could understand that at the end they got into the world to come. I said, Rashi Mechsav, Emes, they're able to understand from the verses that even Menashe, King Menashe, Yeravim, the son of Nevat, and Achav, which we mentioned, they were horrible kings, etc., etc., nevertheless they get into the world to come. God says it's on me. I'll accept their transgressions to bring them into so they should be married to go into the world to come. Menashe Kemashmai, who are we talking about? Menashe. Okay, Rashi says Menashe is the son of Chizkiyahu. Okay, I believe you're missing a bit here. This is the end of the page. No, let me return to the next page. This one you have everything here. Hold on. And what does it mean about Achitophel? Achitophel comes from Yehuda. So therefore he's also added to the people that end up having a worship portion in the world to come. Okay. The reason it says Mo is Reishi, the strength of my head about Yeravim, because he was the first king, Marsha says. But it says Nikr Mechaykiki, from the word Chaykik, also the word Chakika is like someone who carves in, is because David was also a student of Achitophel. Achitophel was the head of the Sanhedrin. But again, he's not a. When we talk about, whenever the Rebbe would refer to Achitophel, the Rebbe would say Achitophel HaRasha, Achitophel the wicked. He was a wicked person. But again, complicated personalities. At the same time, he's the head of the Sanhedrin. It says that he was the one who was always learning the pasuk, even when David wanted to dig when he prepared the temple, and David dug all the way to the abyss, and the waters were going to destroy the world. He asked, "Who knows if we could throw in a cheres, a name of God, into the waters to calm the waters down?" He was waiting for Achitophel to say so, and then Achitophel wouldn't say it. So the Medrash says that David said to Achitophel, "If you don't say it, I'm going to punish you." So he was forced to say it, but he needed Achitophel to say it, even though David knew the law, but he needed Achitophel to pass in the law. Okay, again, complicated people that we'll learn about, I think, a little later. What is Moav Sirachzi? What does it mean that Moav is a washing pot? Who is that referring to? That's Gechazi, Shelak al Isker Rechitza. What does it mean, washing pot? That's referring to Gechazi. Gechazi was the attendant of Elisha the prophet. Elisha the prophet is the student of Elijah. And the time of the beginning of the first of the kings of Israel, kings of Achav, he was the prophet that prophesied. He's a very tough character. We learned a bit about Elisha before. So Gehazi was his attendant, also very close to the prophet, and a horrible person. What is the story of Iskir Rechitza? That he got punished because the story we just learned about the Haftorah, right? And Tazri Mitzorah, the Haftorah of Gehazi. That Gehazi is the attendant of Elisha, and Naaman, who is the general from Assyria, comes down to get cured from his leprosy. And when he's cured from his leprosy by going into the Jordan River, so he wants to give huge gifts to Elisha. And so Elisha says, "No, I don't want any gifts. I just want you to recognize that there's a God." It says Naaman converts, he becomes Jewish. Or Ger Toshav, I forget which one. One becomes a Ger Toshav, one becomes a Jew. So Naaman becomes a God-fearing person. But Gehazi goes and chases him down and says, "Give me the money." There was a change of heart. The prophet wants the money. And he took it for himself. And he took it for himself. He himself was punished with leprosy. And so because what means Shalak, he got punished, al iske rechitza, because of the washing, because Naaman washed himself and then wanted to give money, and Gehazi took the money. That was where things went wrong. But he was also always a bad attendant. He never listened to Elisha. Elisha told him to resurrect the child. He didn't do it properly. He was a troublemaker, like Rabbi Stein. We're learning Rabbi Stein's Gemara. I told you guys this idea once. Gehazi asked, my son asked the Rabbi Stein's, why did he keep him around? If he was such a bad attendant, why did he keep him around? He was a bad gabbai. So he said, because no one else is better. I mean, if he figured, what's the point in firing him? The next guy would be just as bad. Either way, that was Rebbe Steinsaltz's insight. But the idea is that Gehazi also has a portion of the world to come. What did he do so bad? He took the money, but why is he on the list of people that have the world to come? At the end, he did horrible things. He went and he put in the name of God into the idols in Dan to make it seem as if they're godly. He got so angry that he was discommunicated. Is that right? It says Elisha pushed them away b'shtei yadayim, with two hands. So he went out there to be very destructive, and therefore he doesn't have a portion of the world to come. But at the end, it says even Gehazi gets it. Al Edom Ashdech Ali, who's it talking about that on Edom, meaning Edomi? I throw my heel, I throw my shoe. That's Doeg the Adomi. Doeg is also. He's the advisor to Saul, the first king of Israel, who pursues and torments David. These are all people around David and his family. So Doeg is Adomi. He's from Adam, so David wants this. It says that his ashes were spread everywhere, And David says he's going to step on him in the Beis Medrash. When David walks, he walks on the ashes of Doeg. Nevertheless, God says he'll let him in too. Alai Peleshus Yisairi. So what's it mean? Alai Peleshus Yisairi. Omer Machi Ashar Sifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The angels say to God, Rebbeinu Shalaylam. This is, I mean, the master of the universe. Im Yavi David Shahargas Aplishti. If David is going to come, what's David's great claim to fame? Is he killed Goliath? He killed the great Plishti that was his first act of bravery, right? Gat, and he gave the city of Gat, like we learned, to the Jewish people. So he said, "What are you going to do?" He's going to come and he's going to ask you, on what basis are you letting Achitophel, my tormentor, and Doeg, who pursued me, why are you letting him into the world to come? They were on the list of people who should be in the world to come. So the angels ask God, what are you going to do with David? David's going to be offended. David says, I step on the ashes of Doeg. So God says, this is a great answer. Amalahen, God tells the angels, he says, Alay la soisin reim zelazeh. I'm going to get them past their fights, their bickering. I'm going to make them friends. Right? Not that I'm going to override David's sensitivity. I'm going to be able to reach such unity that even David and Achitophel and Doeg won't fight anymore. So Rashi says, the Asim Yehuda, Achitophel comes from Yehuda. The Ka'amr like David. How do we know that Achitophel comes from Yehuda? Because David tells him, Va'ata enish ke'erki, you're like you're a person amongst us. Alufei miyudai shahayi kail Achitophel miyudai. He said, you're known to me. How is he known to him? Because he comes from the tribe of Yehuda. Proivai shahayi mishevet Yehuda keDavid means he called him his relative, so to say, because they came from the same tribe. Moiv sirachsi David de ka'asimi moiv. Here, Rashi does not learn what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that it's talking about David himself. When it says Moab, because David is from a Moab, right? Ruth, what we learned about in Shavuos, she's from Moab. She's from the kingdom of Moab. So therefore, it's talking about David. It doesn't say why David's mentioned in this verse. No one ever said David wouldn't have a portion in the world to come. It says Sir Rachti Gechazi, but when it says about the washing, Rashi does say that's talking about Gechazi Shesar V'Nitztar Al Iskei Rechitza. Why was he sent away? Why did he get Tziras leprosy? Because of the story of the washing. Because when Naaman washed and he wanted to gift Elisha with money, and Elisha said, "No, it's a Kiddush Hashem. I'm sanctifying the name of God. That God is the healer, not the waters of Damascus." Right, like he says in the prophecy, I don't need to go to the Jordan River. The waters of Damascus are better waters. Nevertheless, the prophet performs a miracle. So when he takes the money, he himself gets the tziras. What's al edem ashtechnali? Anayil oisan meganeden. I'm going to lead him into the Garden of Eden. So the angels say, Im yave David shahargas aplishti v'yotzek lefenecha, and he's going to cry out to you. Al sha'ate noisin chelik l'doig v'achitophel. He's going to call foul. David's going to say, why did you give a person in the world to come to David and Achitophel? They're my enemies. They weren't just David's enemies. It's not a personal thing. They're enemies to God, right? David is a man of God. Everything they try to do is to destroy David's. It's like the person who's out there saying horrible things about the Jewish people I just read about. Right? It's not an affront to a certain person. It's an affront to the Jewish people, to God. What are you going to do to appease David? They hated David. Amr lehem. So what does God say to the angels? It's up to me to bring peace, to appease and make friendship and love amongst these people. I'm going to have to bring David, Achitophel, and Doeg to work their issues out. It means means friendship. It's up to me to bring peace amongst them. I'm going to stop here because the Gemara afterwards goes back a little bit to the book of Eicha. Just a few ideas before we finish off over here. Again, the Mefarshim also bring what Rashi says, that he says Moavi means David. Doesn't say why he'd be mentioned here. Maybe just because he would be upset. Okay, the idea of Naaman we talked about, that he got the leprosy, therefore he had to be cured. What does it mean that I step on, my heel steps on the Edomite? So it says, the Gemara says later about Achitophel, about Doeg, that the angels spread the ashes, obviously as a metaphor, of Doeg in all the synagogues. And David said, "Sha'al Edom al afrei shal Doeg Adoi me'ashlech nali." I step on on the Edomite on Doeg, who comes from Edom. And he wasn't just doing it to desecrate him, but that was a kapara. So here the Mashal learns that actually David was trying to help Doeg by stepping on him in the base medrash. He was bringing atonement to Doeg, so he shouldn't have to suffer more, and he should be able to get into the world to come. David doesn't hold grudges. The angels think he does hold grudges. We see David doesn't hold grudges. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Laila Tov, everyone. Again, thank you for joining. This is all interesting Gemaras. We're going to continue hopefully next week, learning about other interesting characters and peoples.